the sun is really setting and we are transitioning into evening. It's really noticeable how much earlier it is. It is feeling darker, and I wonder if any of you are feeling that physically or emotionally. I find myself getting very tired much earlier at night. So on Shabbat, we have a sacred opportunity to replenish our stores of energy, hopefully physical, emotional, and spiritual energy. And we can do that so well by connecting and giving each other the energy that we need and giving each other the energy that we have to give. So from wherever you are joining, we're so glad you're here with your energy. And whatever kind of energy that is, whether you're tired or energized, and geographically, wherever you're coming from, we have one of our members here all the way from across the pond in England. Welcome, Jenny. We're so glad to have you. I love that TOS has these outposts kind of around the world now. Before you know it, we're going to be like Chabad. We're going to have an outpost in every far-flung city around the world. And we have Mimi from California. So we are spanning many time zones and many miles. It's really wonderful. And from wherever the rest of you are joining us, welcome, welcome. Let's take a deep breath to enter into Shabbat, and then I'll lead us in with some music. But let's invite in some spaciousness into our bodies and our souls so that we can be Kabbalat Shabbat, so that we can be receiving Shabbat. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. So that line is a line from the book of Psalms, and though traditionally we attribute the Psalms to King David, they may have various authorship, and I'm just imagining that whoever composed that line of Psalms, which means how good it is to dwell together, couldn't possibly have imagined dwelling together across thousands of miles, and that would feel very much like a sacred togetherness, and yet it does. And now we are all experts in being together across many miles. And it's funny to think if we could go back and tell the author of that psalm what it would mean to Shevet Achim Gam Yachad, what they might think of that. So moving into our Kabbalat Shabbat service, we're going to light candles in a moment. So if you have your candles nearby, I want to get those ready. I want to share one thing about where we are in the calendar. You may know that we have just entered, or we have just moved through Rosh Chodesh, the very beginning of a new month. And it is the very beginning of the month of Cheshvan. And Cheshvan is also known as Mar Cheshvan. Now, Mar means bitter. We don't actually know, scholars don't know whether the Mar Cheshvan is called Mar Cheshvan because of bitterness, because they're actually, after the marathon of holidays that we all just went through, there are no festivals. We have Shabbat, of course, but no holidays in Cheshvan. So I'd always thought, well, Mar Cheshvan is because it's bitter, because we don't have festivals. But just today, I came across another explanation, which is that Mar can also mean a drop of water. And this is the month in which we begin praying for rain. In fact, just last Shabbat was the first, right? Last Shabbat, has it been once or twice? We just began praying for rain, and we switched our blessing in the Amidah to the blessing, God who makes the wind blow and brings down the rain. And so we say Mar, a drop of water, attached to Cheshvan, the month in which we begin praying for rain. And then, because this is the parasha of Noah and the flood, I thought it was so interesting that another interpretation is that the Mabul, the flood, began in this month. And so Mar, drop of water, flood, Noah, all coming together to call this month Mar Cheshvan. So a little tidbit that you can bring out at cocktail parties and impress everybody with your knowledge of this interpretation of Mar Cheshvan. So Chodesh Tov, everyone. Have a good month. I hope that this month of Cheshvan, though it is without official festival days, will be filled with a lot of joy. And certainly it is an opportunity to take a deep breath and perhaps get into some kind of regular rhythm as we're in this period that some people, and certainly in Israel, call Acharei HaChagim, after all the Chagim, after the festivals. So we're in this kind of perhaps more stable, let's hope, time, more regular rhythm of daily life, and what beauty can we find there. So we know that it's going to continue to get darker earlier, and in I think a couple of weeks are going to change the clocks. Most of us here in the States anyway are going to experience darkness even earlier. And so candlelighting is going to become more and more important. So we're going to light our candles together. The candle lighting blessing is on page 2. And please share your light and your screen if you have candles nearby and want to share in this ritual. We'll bring in the light 3 times into our hearts and into our homes, so that the light can fill us, and then we can share it with others as we move through Shabbat and into our new week ahead. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Let's sing Shalom Aleichem on page 24. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitchem leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch
turn to Psalm 96 on page 13. Psalm 96 begins, Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, sing to God a new song. And we could ask, how can we sing to God a new song when we use the same words every week as our ancestors have done for thousands of years, and we return to familiar melodies week after week? Well, of course, today we are different than we were a week ago. I invite you to think back on your week and whatever experiences you had, hopefully positive ones that have changed you in some way and to made you a new person. And as mundane and silly as it sounds, for me, that experience is learning PowerPoint this week. I know I seem very young and hip and tech savvy, but PowerPoint has eluded me, and I am now a much more skilled PowerPoint user and a little different than I was a week ago. So whether you learned something new this week, or you just had a great experience, I invite you to bring that newness as we sing together Psalm 96 on page 13.
Yallai, lai, 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 yallai, lai, 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 yallai, lai, 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 yallai, lai, yallai, lai, shiru ladonai, shir chadash, shiru ladonai, kol haaretz, shiru ladonai, baruch shemo, basru miyom leyom, Yeshuato, sapru vagoyim, kevodo, bechol ha'amim, niflotav, ki gadol Adonai, umehulal meod, norahu, al kol Elohim, yai lai lai, ki kol Elohei ha'amim elilim, v'Adonai shamayim asa, hod v'hadar lefanav, oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho, yallai lai lai lai, yallai lai, yallai lai, yallai lai lai lai, yai la lai lai lai, lai 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 lai, yai lai lai lai, yai yai lai, yai lai, yai lai. Let's turn to page 20 for Lecha Dodi, verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. On verse 9, if we're able to physically rise and face the entryway to our homes to welcome Shabbat as a bride or queen, or just someone, a beloved that we are so happy to reunite with, we can do that either in body or spirit as we sing together. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, shamor v'zachor bedibur echad, Hishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, Ushemo echad, Leshem ultiferet velitila. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor haberacha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof ma'ase b'machshava tchila. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela, Shabbat nekabela. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת nekabela. So on Shabbat, we step back, bring a better sense of mindfulness, perhaps that we don't have during the course of the week, which allows us to be in touch with amazement. So because I recently came across it again, although I've read this poem many times, I wanted to share a brief excerpt from a Mary Oliver poem that is about amazement. And she writes, "When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world." So I wonder if we could reflect for a moment on how we take the world into our arms, how we might be married to amazement, how we live in such a way that we are not simply visiting, that we are immersing ourselves in this world in such a way that we can draw from it amazement. And out of that amazement, what can we give back to this world? If we live our lives with that as our posture, that as our stance, which is not realistic for us to walk around saying, wow, every moment of every day. We are human beings. But if we cultivate that sense of wonder and amazement, and if we all did that, what might the world look like? And what can we as individuals do to cultivate that in ourselves? So we're going to sing our amazement psalm, Magadlu Ma'aseh Chaya, top of page 342. But I wonder, since I usually ask you what gave you a sense of wonder or awe, I'd like to ask you tonight, what is something you can do to cultivate that sense of amazement? Like for me, it's taking photographs of nature. That helps me pay attention in a deeper way, and it helps me to be amazed when I'm looking at my surroundings with an eye toward taking a photograph of it. Are there ways that you experience the world with more of a sense of amazement? What helps you approach the world in that way? So for a moment, if anyone would like to share aloud, you're welcome to do that. If you want to raise your hand, I'll call on you. But I would encourage you to put it in the chat. As many of you as would like can do that. So Diane, I saw your hand. Go ahead. Just be sure to unmute.
I read books from different authors and Japanese authors, and I see the world every day in different from different authors, and I really love that.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Larry said teaching this important lesson to the next generation is a way that you can cultivate that. Wonderful. Anyone else? So think about it, and if anything comes to you, please share it if you're able to do that in the chat on Zoom or Facebook, which we'll check as well. But think about it, because ideally we would give ourselves the gift of experiencing the world in that way, not only on Shabbat when perhaps we have a little bit more spaciousness to experience it that way, but even just a moment of every day. So we're hearing from Amy and Tom that they bought a pocket field microscope. That is an amazing invisible world around us. And Amy says she enjoys photography and finds amazement in pictures. Wow, that is wonderful. A microscope, right? Just to look through a microscope and to be amazed. And actually, Gavi, my oldest son, came home the other day and told us something he learned in science class, where they were beginning to learn about string theory, and about the unit. He said something about you could never imagine how many the tiniest particles imaginable, are on the head of a pin. And we were all just for a moment just marveling at the tiny, tiny, absolutely invisible to us world that exists below the surface of what we can see. So these are wonderful responses. I encourage you to keep thinking, and that will help us all cultivate a sense of wonder and think about it and share it with others. Share what brings you amazement and joy. So let's sing at the top of page 342. And feel free to keep writing responses in the chat if you think of things. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Keep going. Magadlu, Masechaya. Hallelu, meodamku machshevo techa. Hallelujah, Magadlu, Masechaya. Me'od amku machshevo techa. So, singing around by myself, knowing that you're out there, hoping and trusting that you're all out there singing the other part of the round, kind of reminded me of a trust fall. Just closing your eyes and you're just gonna assume and hope that the person is there to catch you. I'm assuming and hoping you were all singing hallelujah, and so it was in fact around, and that clearly was audible all together on some transcendent level or across cyberspace. So we're going to move into Baruch Hu on page 28. Please rise in body or spirit for the call to prayer, bringing us together. And actually, because we are spread across unimaginable numbers of miles, they're really big. We can imagine them. They're large numbers of miles. But I would love to invite us to unmute if we would like, those of us here on the Zoom, for the responsive line, because how cool to hear voices from California to Cambridge, England, to lots of places in between, for the responsive line. So go ahead and unmute if you would like for the responsive line. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed. We can be seated. Thank you. That was beautiful.
Our attitude towards bringing on the evening and the early darker nights might be a bit negative. We might not love the loss of daylight, the loss of sun and warmth, But there are so many creatures out there in the world who love the nighttime. This is their time to flourish, to fly around, to search for food. And so, in honor of all of those animals who love this time, and of all those parents who get to enjoy a little bit of quiet once their kids go to bed, let's offer the blessing for bringing on the evening hours on page 30. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uvein laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hamariv aravim.
Amen. For the Ahavat Olam blessing for eternal love, unending love, we're going to read, we'll have a screen share from Rabbi Rami Shapiro, a beautiful interpretation of Ahavat Olam. So feel free to read it aloud with me, or just follow along, or just listen. We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us, even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us, even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us, even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved by an unending love. We are supported by hands that uplift us, even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us, even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved by an unending love. Embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled, ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. And the last couple of lines on page 32, going right into the Shema on page 34. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam. Amen. Page 36. כי אהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לתותבות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת.
We sing the song of our ancestors who marched from slavery to freedom. We turn to Micha Mocha on page 40, and we raise up our voices and give thanks for redemption.
Micha Mocha ba'elim Adonai, Micha Mocha nedar ba'kodesh, Nora tehilot osei fele, Nora tehilot osei fele. מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים. זה אלי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. We pray that God spread over us a Sukkot Shalom, a canopy of peace, on page 42. And it'll be 3 lines down. And then the last 3 lines on page 42. Imagine yourself, as that Rami Shapiro reading said, embraced and held and soothed and counseled. Remember and imagine that feeling of being embraced. The universe holds you in its grasp and will not let you fall, said the great poet Rilke. Imagine that, get in touch with that so that you can bring that out into the world. So many in our world are in need of a sense of safety and embrace. Think of a way that you can bring it to somebody else. Could be that you donate a coat, a warm coat for an Afghan refugee to wear this winter. It could be through a financial donation that enables somebody to eat who is hungry. So in whatever small way we can embrace each other, in that way God's Sukkot Shalom embraces us. Ufros aleinu Sukkot, Sukkot, Shalomecha, Ufros aleinu Sukkot, Sukkot, Shalomecha. Baruch atah Adonai haporei Sukkot Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Israel ve'al Yerushalayim.
We turn now to the words of the Amidah on page 46. And as Rabbi Berkman mentioned, in the second blessing, we now ask for the wind to blow and the rain to fall. Mashiv haruach umarid hagashem. As Israel heads into its winter season, its rainy season, we spiritually connect to that our holy land, and we pray that they experience good weather and a fruitful winter so that they may have abundant crops this year. We rise in body or spirit for the Amidah, page 46.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotinu v'imotzeinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו ביהבה. מלך חוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Continue with our individual prayers, and we'll come back together in a few moments for a prayer for peace. Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav, Uyaseh Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru yimeru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav, Uyaseh Shalom aleinu, ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
We move from our prayer for peace to our prayer for healing. If you'd like to share the name of friends or loved ones who you're saying Misha Berach for this evening, please take a moment to type them into the chat. And if you prefer to unmute in a moment, you're welcome to share them out loud with our community. As a community tonight, we're praying for the healing of Cassandra Warshawski, Chaya Blaima Bat Chaim Chia Vasilia Ruchel, Jeffrey Colt, Chaya Zifra Bat Zelda, Ann Bishop, Chana Razel Bat Menachem Mendel, Gerald, Molly Reese, David Jacobs, Roman Rachamim Ben Zenaida Zilpa, Lois Rubin, Janine Morgan, Nick Couchman, Liesel, Alan, Marcia, Jerry, Susan, and Jalen, Amy Miller, Steve Fromm, Steve Adler Golden, Tom's sisters, Pat and Marie, For all those mentioned tonight and for those in our hearts, we turn now to page 253 to offer our prayer for healing.
Mi sheberach avoteinu mekor habracha leimoteinu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imoteinu mekor habracha la'avoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
We wish everybody a refuah shlema, a complete and speedy recovery. This Monday in Brookline, in Cambridge, and for the very first time in Boston, we will mark Indigenous Peoples Day, a day that honors Native people as the first inhabitants of the Americas. The shift from marking the second Monday in October from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, while not without controversy, is ultimately, in my opinion, a very positive step, and it offers us an opportunity to rethink history, to reshape the narrative of the last 500 years in America, and refute the notion of the quote-unquote vanishing Indian, a mistaken view of Native Americans as a people who only existed in the past, rather than as a diverse web of individuals and tribes living and navigating the challenges of the 21st century alongside of us. A focus on the distant past obscures both the recent oppression of Indigenous people in this country and the bold ways that they translated their values and traditions to the modern world. About a decade ago, I was working with colleagues in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I met an incredible artist in his 60s who had been kidnapped from the Navajo reservation as a child and forcibly adopted by a white Christian family as part of a larger effort to strip Native children of their languages, customs, and culture, and to force them to assimilate. As a very well-educated, self-professed progressive person, I was shocked when I heard this story and that I had never heard of it before. Sadly, this was a far from isolated incident, and through the late 19th and the first half of the 20th century, hundreds of thousands of Native American children were taken off of reservations and enrolled in schools that were federally funded and often church-run. These US boarding schools inspired a similar program in Canada, which is now reeling from the discovery of hundreds of unmarked graves at the residential schools its First Nations children were forced to attend. When the US program ended in 1968, it was replaced by the Indian Adoption Project, of which this artist was adopted under, which separated children from their families for another whole decade. It is estimated that just between 1941 and 1967, as many as 1/3 of Indian children were separated from their families, according to a report by the Association of American Indian Affairs. It is hard to comprehend the devastating impact that this had on individual lives, family life, and cultural preservation, just in many of our lifetimes. But Indigenous Peoples Day is not just a time to examine the sins of the past. It is also a moment to appreciate how the wisdom and experience of Native people can manifest in values and actions that shape a more just future. It is something that we witnessed with the protest at Standing Rock that resisted the Keystone XL pipeline that would have run through the Sioux Reservation. And that pipeline posed a risk not only in case of an oil spill, but would have facilitated the release of greenhouse gas emissions from the extraction of oil from tar sands in Alberta. And the courage of those members of the Sioux Nation and those people who joined them with them was inspiring to many people in this country and around the world. More recently, I was surprised and impressed by an ambitious multi-billion-dollar residential development that was launched by the Squamish Nation on the site of an ancestral village in order to support their nation and create models of urban development that prioritize green space and discourage driving. For generations, the Squamish controlled land in Vancouver and benefited from its natural resources, the fish, elk, deer, and salmon. But in 1913, they were given 2 days' notice and were ordered to vacate their village of Sinakwa and board a barge north. In 2002, the Squamish regained part of their ancestral village, and last year, 80% of their nation voted to support its development. Time will tell if this project provides the opportunity to heal and offers the fresh start for this community, but it is encouraging to see Indigenous communities have the ability to determine their own future, informed by their values, customs, and traditions. One of the reasons that I am so grateful for the existence of the State of Israel is that it allows the Jewish people to realize the potential of our Torah and our traditions manifest in the world. And I wonder what would happen if we gave greater voice to the teachings and traditions of Indigenous people, especially as they relate to the earth and our relationship to it, and allow them to manifest these teachings into the 21st century and how we conduct ourselves. This week is Parashat Noah, when we read the story of the Great Flood and of Noah's Ark. And so I'd like to share another flood story. This is from the Ojibwe tribe, an Anishinaabe people that currently reside in southern Canada and the northern Midwest. And if you are familiar with the details of the account in Torah, you will notice some striking similarities, as well as some interesting differences. And I encourage you to listen to the story fully, and if you'd like to stick around after services and discuss some of the parallels and some of the differences. Long ago, the world was filled with evil. Men and women lost respect for each other. The Creator was unhappy about this and decided to cause a great flood to purify the earth. A man named Wanabuzhu survived. He turned some floating sticks and a log into a raft for the animals and himself. They floated around for a full moon, waiting for the water to go down. It didn't, so Wanabuzhu decided to do something about it. Mong, he called to the loon, you are an excellent swimmer. See if you can dive down to the old world and bring back a lump of mud in your bill. With mud, I will create a new world. The loon dove into the water and was gone a long time. When he finally did return, he said, I could not reach the old world. It was too far down. Amik, called Wanabuzhu to the beaver, you are an excellent swimmer. Will you try next? The beaver dove off and was gone even longer than the loon, but he too returned empty-handed. Is there anyone else who will try? Asked Wanabuzhu. Just then, a small coot, a medium-sized water bird named Ajigade, came swimming along and asked, what is going on? Get away, Ajigade, called one of the birds. We do not have time for your nonsense. Now the animals began arguing loudly with each other. Everyone had a different plan about how to get the mud, but no one could agree on whose plan they would use. For hours and hours they argued. By and by, someone noticed that the sun was beginning to go down. They would have to put off planning until the next day. Everyone began to find his or her sleeping spot on the raft to rest for the night. The loon asked, whatever happened to that silly little coot? Suddenly, there was shouting from the other side of the raft. Somebody had noticed a small body floating in the water. The water birds paddled hurriedly to investigate and found that it was Ajagade. They brought his body to the raft. Wanabusu lifted him up, and looking in his small beak, he found a particle of mud. Little Ajagade had reached the old world and got the mud. He had given his life to do this. The other animals were ashamed of themselves for having made fun of little Ajagade. They hung their heads. They felt very sad. Wanabusu took Ajagade's little body and softly blew life back into him. Wanabusu held him closely to warm him and announced that from that day forward, Ajagade would always retain a place of honor among the animals. Wanabusu set the little coot down on the water, and he swam off as though nothing had happened. Then Wanabusu took the mud in his hands and began to shape it. Next, he commanded it to grow. As it grew, he needed a place to put it. The snapping turtle came forward and said, "I have a broad back. Place it here." Wanabusu put it on the turtle's back so that it could grow larger. "From this day on, you shall have the ability to live in all the worlds," he said to the turtle, "under the mud, in the water, and on land." Slowly, the mud began to take the shape of land. Wanabusu placed some tiny ants on it. This made it start to spin and grow even more. It grew, and more animals stepped onto it until finally it was large enough for a moose to walk about. Now Wanabusu sent the bird to fly around to survey how large the land was. He said to them, "Return to me now and again to let me know how the land is doing. Send back your messages with songs." To this day, that is what the birds continue to do, and that is why they are called the singers. At last, Wanabusu stepped onto the new world. It had become a home, a place for the animals, insects, and birds, a place for all living things to live in harmony. Now, I think we can have an interesting discussion about how this relates to our own flood narrative. And if you want to stick around after, I invite you to join me in that. But it has power on its own. And I invite us this weekend, especially on Monday, to take some opportunity to learn from Indigenous people in our community from around the world, to read their stories and inhabit their space, and to see how we can make manifest those values in the world. And as Maya shared in the chat, there is a celebration that's happening on Saturday from 2 to 4. If you live in Brookline, please join them to take part. And my hope is that these stories and these traditions will continue to grow and to help shape a healthier relationship with the earth and with all of creation. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to move to Aleinu on page 287. And I'd like to invite you to rise in body or spirit for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shehu notei shamayim veyosed haaretz, umoshav ikaro bashamayim mima'al, ushchinatu zo begofei meromim, hu Eloheinu einod, v'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. You're welcome to be seated. We turn to the words of Mourner's Kaddish, and we think of those lost recently and in days past. If there's anybody tonight who'd like to share the name of a loved one or friend that they're saying Kaddish for, please take a moment to share their name in the chat or to unmute and share their name with us out loud. Is it-
I'm mute.
Doris, you want to share?
Our son Peter, Frank Feldman, and also Tanisha Karen Dubnoff.
In English, that would be Valerie's mother-in-law.
Thank you. We think of Peter and Valerie's mother-in-law this Shabbat. We add the names of Robert and Elaine Muscat, of Ken Sisson, a past TOS president, of Esther Gorfine and Linda Grossman, the mother of Jeremy Grossman and his wife Jill, and the grandmother of Noah and Layla. The full list of yahrzeits are in the chat. We rise, if it's our custom, as we turn to page 294 for Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon, uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach leolam ulamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha b'rechu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran v'yalma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be a blessing. It's wonderful to see everybody here tonight with us, and I just want to share a couple of thank yous and some brief announcements. Thank you to Josh for being here and making sure everything is running smoothly behind the scenes. We always appreciate it. Tomorrow morning, we have the opportunity to celebrate the bar mitzvah of Aviv Arendt. And on behalf of his mother, Maya, and our community, we want to invite you to join us. The service will be outside in the parking lot, and the community is welcome to attend.
And if you'd like to attend on Zoom and not outdoors, you're welcome to do that as well. It's open, as always, on Zoom. But because we'll be outdoors, you're also welcome to join. And if you would like to join, I believe you need to. We would like for you to register in advance in the link that's in your newsletter, if possible. And Mazel Tov to Maya, to Aviv, and to Aviv's brother Ariel on this beautiful Simcha.
Next Friday, we will also be outside, and we hope the weather is good so you can join us in the parking lot. We've got the tent for a couple more weeks, and we're trying to take advantage of it. So if you've been tempted to come join us in person on a Friday night, while we're outside, please join us this Friday or one of the upcoming Fridays. And just to repeat, on Saturday, there is Indigenous Peoples Day celebration in Brookline from 2 to 4 at the Florida Ruffin Ridley School cafeteria and playground. And we hope anybody who is in the Brookline area is able to attend.
And I want to make an announcement about next Saturday morning. My son Ami will become bar mitzvah, and I would love to have you join on Zoom. The information is in the newsletter, or if the link hasn't been in the newsletter, it will be this week. We wish that we could all be together in person, but we would be so delighted if you would be present with us on Zoom. We will be in the sanctuary Zooming from there, and we're really excited.
We're going to conclude tonight's service with Kiddush and Motzi and a closing song. And then please stick around to schmooze. And if you've been on Facebook or Brookline Public Access, please come join us on Zoom to say hello. Rabbi Berkman, you're going to lead us in Kiddush, which is on page 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'yahava uv'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'ei kodesh, zecher letziat mitzrayim, ki banu v'acharta, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. המוציא. Okay, I can't resist telling you that one of my dogs just heard me say hamotzi, and absolutely his ears went up, his eyes got big. This dog knows Hebrew. He knows his blessings. They've also been sitting next to me eyeing the challah the entire time, and this is the big moment they've been waiting for. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lecha min haaretz. Amen. Okay. While I give my dog some challah, I'm going to ask us to turn to page 321 for Adon Olam. And last week we did this melody and Josh played along on guitar. And I'm hoping to do this one more frequently, including at my son's bar mitzvah next week. It's an Israeli melody composed by, I believe his name is Uri Chitman, and it's beautiful. So if you don't know it, you'll soon know it. Let's see if you can follow along. Page 321. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol יציר נברא לעת נעשה וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We can say goodbye to our friends on the live stream. Thank you so much for